3 of the livery guide video series, and tonight I'm going to be talking about how to properly place a decal. It's quite a important process to learning how to actually make a livery, as I'm sure you could assume, but the sort of things that I'm going to be talking about tonight will make your liveries above the cut of the Discover page liveries that you might find. You notice that your liveries will look a lot more realistic, they'll look a lot more professional. They do take a lot more time, but I'm sure that that time will pay off considerably. So let's go to actually apply a decal to a car. So let's say I'm going to start with this RCF, because there are some interesting edges on this car that you might find useful for actually applying a livery. I'm going to find a lot of use from the different contours that are on this car to explain it to you and everything, so bear with me. Alright, as you can see, I'm removing the default livery, and you're going to apply a layer. So it's going to ask you which direction you want to point your camera to start applying the decal. I'm going to demonstrate one thing that might be a problem for you by doing it from the front. If you have the default projection method, this is important, it's going to align with the camera. Align with the surface. So it's going to apply it from the direction that you are facing, and you won't really be able to get into interesting angles. So let's say that I want to apply this decal here. As you notice, it does some weird sort of things, and that's not a straight line, as you can tell. That's not what you want to do. And if you do it from the side, let's say you want to actually paint this area right here, but you don't want to paste the inside of here. So if you try to apply the decal there, it won't really function properly. It won't give you a chance to just paint this area and not the inside. So there are a few things I'm going to teach you to help you deal with those sort of issues. So I'll use the fin here down at the bottom as a good example, because you can see there's a surface here and then there's a surface behind it. So the first thing that I'm going to teach you is about the projection area. If you reduce this angle limit, where you can go from +10 to -10, but if you reduce it, then essentially what it does is it decreases of the maximum angle that the decal is going to be projected onto the surface from the direction of the camera. So I know that's very complicated, but as you can see, because that surface in the back is at a different angle than the camera, the more you decrease this, the less that it will show. The depth limit is how far away the decal is being projected onto the car away from the camera. If you reduce that, as you can see, it is reducing it. In fact, I don't think it's how far away from the camera it's being reduced. I think it's how far away it is from the main surface that you applied the decal that it's being projected to. So that's something to keep in mind. Those two are very useful, and I'll demonstrate this again on something that I think is underutilized when people make custom liveries. Let's say you want to put a sponsor decal on the side here. I'll put I don't know, maybe this one. So you apply this to the side. I know that's cursed, it's Nissan, but I'm applying it to a Lexus. Anyways, so as you can see, it's projecting onto that surface, and I don't know, some people have expressed to me that they actually think that looks cool. I don't, and this is nothing that you will see in real life. It just doesn't look good to me at all. And the obvious way to fix this would be then to go to your projection limiter, change your angle limit. As you can see, it's reducing how much of an angle away from the camera that the decal was applied with, that it is projecting the decal. And as you can see, there is a little bit of blue on that area where the wing attaches to the car, and that's because it's being projected away from the camera at a certain distance. Just reduce that, and there you go. Now you have almost a perfect projection until you finally do that little bit there. There you go. Now it's perfectly on there. It doesn't have any sort of residue, so to speak, on the rest of the car. Perfect. So you'll find that to be quite useful. Now I'm going to go to a different car. Let's say you're trying to go into tight spaces on a car. Let's go to group 3, and I'm going to go to the Renault because I think this is the best example. So if I can find it, Renault Sport, let's go to the RS01, doesn't matter which one. They both have this quirk. So let's say you're trying to apply a decal and you're trying to fill in this area in the center with black. Well, when you're looking at it from this direction, you're only going to get so much, right? So how do you get in there? This is where you're going to want to use another available option, where you go to projection method and you go to align with camera. Now you can actually align the camera before applying the decal, and the Renault is kind of difficult, so you can only do so much, but it definitely covers more of the inside if you can find some good angles to apply a decal inside of there. So that's how you get into tight areas. And then let's say you're doing the side. I'm not sure exactly what to call this, but it's on several mid-engine cars. This flap here. Say you want to cover that. So you apply the decal to paint it, and yeah. So on the inside here, I don't know if you can see it. There's still some yellow. This is where you actually do plus angle limit, and then it covers the whole area there because it's increasing the angle as to where it actually places it. I think 10 represents a value of 180 degrees. So if you put it all the way up, and then if you want to increase the depth limit, you can actually cover, which is very interesting. As you can see, it's adjusting the depth as to which the decal is being projected away from the camera. So those are things to understand, to experiment with. They're going to be very useful for applying decals to the car. The next topic is going to be a little bit more conceptual, so I'm going to be talking about contours, and I initially wanted to use that RCF as an example, but I feel that might be a bit too complicated, so I'll go with something a bit more simple so it's easier to understand. Let's say I go with the 458 Italia, which when I first started making liveries seemed to be the most difficult car to make a livery for. So, I don't know if you can see from this shot, but there are some contours on this car, and what I mean by that are these edges. So there's an edge here that goes along the side of the car. There's an edge down here that goes along the side of the car and comes down before you get back to the wheel. There's an edge up here that's a little bit less obvious, but you can kind of see it from this angle. And there's an edge here right next to the edge of the body panel. There's a little space inside of here. There's a contour up here, and there's a contour there. Same thing on the other side. There's a bit of a smooth contour here. There's definitely a contour here. There's a bit of a contour sort of framing the front intake. There's so you can kind of get the concept of what I mean by a contour. What you want to do when you're making a livery is pay attention to these contours. Use them to your advantage, like this one right here, because it's really going to help sort of mold the design that you want to apply to the car, to the actual car. If I apply just like a plain decal to the side of the car, let's say I'm going to go, I'm going to use ASR as my guinea pig today for this, but let's say I take the A logo and I put it on the side, and it looks okay when you're looking at it from the angle that you actually applied it to, but then it sort of does this weird projection over the top that doesn't look good at all, and it's almost like cutting against the grain, so to speak, with the contour here and the contour there. And I avoided the contour at the bottom, but it does sort of come out on the edge here when you're looking at the wheel well. So yeah, that's not good. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So how do you fix things like this? You want to pay attention to the angle that you're projecting from with your camera. So say I want to project a shape that lines up with this contour here. Well, you want to make the contour look as straight as possible. Like, try to find a camera angle that makes it look straight. And then you can apply the decal. So let's say I just use something simple like that. There you go. Now, almost you have it lined up with the contour. Sometimes you have to do minute adjustments to make that work. But there you go. Now it's properly applied. You will be using a lot more decals when you use this sort of method, but it will line up better with the car. So there you go. I failed to mention before, and this might be very useful for you as well, that there are different ways of manipulating the shape if they're a simple shape. So you want to move your right joystick up if you're going to increase the size of your decal, or down to decrease, and then at a certain point it goes around the other way. So yeah, you want to kind of stay within this positive area, so to speak, when working with manipulating the size. To move it around, you're going to be using the left joystick. I'm actually trying to look at my controller while saying this, so sorry if this is a little bit awkward. If you want to skew, you're going to hold down the L1 trigger and move your left joystick left and right if you want to do it at this angle, and you're going to move it up and down if you want to skew it this way. Alright, and then the last one, I believe, is, I'm pretty sure, oh yes, if you use the Skew button, which I mentioned before is the L1 trigger, and then use your right joystick instead of your left, then you can actually stretch it out either to the side, which is left and right, or up and down, which is also up and down. Now that's not going to be nice when you're working with sponsor logos. Working with the GTR simulator, which shout out to them because they're sponsoring our team, but that doesn't look good. You don't want to do that, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that. You might want to play around with skewing things if you're having to apply decals at weird angles in order to fix them, so to speak, from the angle that they're normally going to be viewed from. So let's say I was forced into a situation where I had to put a wheel sponsor right here in this area, and the only way I could get a good angle to actually apply it was to look awkwardly up into the sky so that it projects at the right angle, and then I'm going to say it's Patronus, and then apply it. Well, you might notice that it already looks kind of skewed from certain angles, and you can use the skewing to correct it, so to speak. And there we go, that doesn't look too bad. And yes, I know that's not an actual tire sponsor, that's a fuel sponsor, but the point stands. You can adjust the sponsor logos that you're using sometimes very minutely to fix them. Now, you can't actually do this depending on how the decal is uploaded. You can do this all with your personal ones because you haven't uploaded them to the community, but you'll find that some collected ones won't let you do that. Like, I'm pretty sure, yeah, that one allows you to do that. Let me think of a good example. Well, I know all the ones that are the brand logos in the game, you can't actually skew. It won't let you do that. It will only let you resize it, that's it. Which is unfortunate because, again, you might need to do that to correct some angles on the way that you've projected it. So those are all very important things to keep in mind. A couple other insights. If you're working with a design that has a gradient anywhere in the design, the edges of the gradient are going to be pixelated at certain angles. So you might actually want to, let's say I made this black for demonstration, you might want to actually cover that up, the edges, sort of frame it, because the edge of this regular decal, the rectangle here, is actually much smoother. And I know it doesn't show up very good on this car, but there is a difference. So that's my tip of the day, so to speak, for gradients. And you'll find that a lot of designs that you're trying to do, let's say we're trying to make like a cool sort of framing thing around this front intake, well, you're not going to be able to do that in one decal. At least not in a way that actually looks good. You're going to have to use multiple decals, and again, just pay attention to the contours, and you'll be set to go. As you can see, I'm following the contour the best I can from what I can see here. And it's going to result in a lot better design. I don't know if you've ever been taught this like back when you were in kindergarten, but the best way to draw something is to create the outline of what you want to draw and then fill in the inside. And that you're going to do precisely exactly the same thing here when you're making a design for a lot of different shapes. The only warning for that is that you got to stay within the 300 decal limit for the body and whatever the other limits are for the other parts of the body. So you might have to be clever about that, but many times if you're creating a really good design, you're going to reach that 300 limit, and that's not abnormal. Don't feel like you're overdoing it. That's exactly what's going to happen if you're making a good design. So don't ever let that demotivate you. So if you exit out of the livery and then let's say we open up a different one, I want to show you how I use some contour observations on cars that I worked on before. So let's say that I work with the LMP1s is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So let me find one of my favorite LMP1 designs that I worked on, the Rothmans. Okay, well, we'll see how many of the logos were actually downloaded in this. Okay, I only no problem. But as you can see, I had to use the contours on this car to apply the stripes well. There's a contour that outlines the top of the car here. There's a contour that sort of wraps around the cockpit all the way to the back. There's a contour on the top of this side rear wheel well and the intake, and there is a contour here on the side. The thing about some cars is that the contours aren't going to be super obvious because they're quite smooth, but if you try to follow them the best you can, you're going to result in a lot better design than if you completely ignored them. But this is super important. Another great example is the front here. I made sure that the blue stayed within the contour all the way down to the bottom, and then wrapped it up here to the side wheel. To the side of the windshield. And even though this is being applied almost from the top, this is being applied from the side, and it had to make that transition smoothly. So that definitely could not have been done in one decal. So yeah, and as you can see, if I'm opening this up, I ended up having to do this in 200 different unique decals, and even though that's the case, it actually looks like a really simple design, but it isn't if you're thinking about it from a technical standpoint, and that's something that you almost have to plan out before you actually start the design. So let's see if I got any comments. No, I don't. But that's okay. I think I covered everything that I want to talk about today in terms of actually applying the decals properly, and how to keep an eye on those contours on the car. But I actually do want to see if I can find other examples to tell you what I'm talking about. Actually, this RCF is a good example. Looking at it front on, you can see that there are contours right here. Definitely one down here that's less obvious than the others, and there's a tiny little contour here that you want to pay attention to in your design. There's a contour here, and many times if you're trying to actually work with a contour, you cannot work with a straight line. You have to work with a collection of round decals. For instance, let me just give you a list of decals that I feel are the most useful for drawing things. The circle, the square, any one of these lines up here, or rectangles. Sometimes a triangle can help you in tight situations. These two in particular I find to be the most useful for outlining things, so to speak. Sometimes you might find this one to be useful. You might find this one to be useful as well. So just keep that in your toolbox when you're working on a livery. All the other patterns aren't really that useful, especially these ones. Like you can find much higher quality sort of these shapes on the community, so I don't see why you would ever use these that are in the actual game, but definitely keep these in your toolbox. You have to think of them as tools rather than decals in and of their own right, because they're supposed to work together to create the shape that you're trying to achieve. So you can see up here, I'm stretching it out. I'm using it to try to match the edge of it up with that particular contour, and that's what I'm going to use to start the shape that I'm trying to achieve here. And then you have one that's right next to the headlights, the other edge that you might want to try to work with. Here you go. We're going to use this shape. I'm going to flip it, and then I'm going to start stretching and skewing it, and then there you go, that's going to form the other edge of this shape that I'm trying to achieve. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the front here, try to create an edge that sort of matches up with that. And then I'll finish it off with a another edge. Let's say I'm gonna use this. I have to skew it. I have to try to match it up with the other decal without making it too obvious that it is a new shape. Alright, now I've achieved my outline, and I'm just gonna fill in the rest of this. As you can see, sometimes it's pretty stubborn. You gotta use multiple decals to fill in some shapes, and there you go. That'd be a demonstration of how to fill in a very particular shape that you don't want to have to spend the time to make the decal on your own systems. Just fill it in with basic shapes, and I was able to achieve that in only 7 decals. And if you put that in perspective, that's not too much out of 300, especially if you're only working with the body portion of the car, which is in blue. Also, this might help you see some contours of the car. There's clearly a contour that's on the side there. There's a couple of really interesting contours down here that you don't want to completely ignore when you're making a livery. There are 2 contours here. There's one that for some reason shows up as a white line, and then there's another one that goes all the way back here. It swoops back here into this back hole. I don't even know what to refer to it as because it's obviously not an intake. And then there's an interesting contour that's just a few millimeters above the brake light in the rear. Maybe you want to play with that, but yeah, those are what contours are. There's even a contour here on the whoa, I don't know why I did that, but there's even a contour on the rear wing here that you want to keep in mind when you put a sponsor on that. And you know, sometimes you have to do weird shapes to, collectively to make it work, and then other times you get lucky and you can actually just do it in one shape with a rectangle. As such. So, yeah, that's how you apply decals to a car in a clever way. Next time, let me see what I would like to talk about next time. I'll tell you what, I'll leave it as a surprise, because I am sure there are a lot more things to talk about. I bet the next thing that I'm going to talk about is color balance, how to choose your colors smartly and apply them to your vehicle. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about how those colors can define you as a driver, how to pick out unique colors that work well together for either a team or for your own personal use. So I'll catch you next time when I go to talk about that. Alright, talk to you later.